Evening all, welcome to another Kingscrusher radio show. So this is Tuesday, around 9 UK time. Okay, so this week we're going to carry on looking at the best of the best from the 1950s. This is part 4 of 5. And for this first game, let's have a look at Fischer versus Samuel Rzewski. So this is played in US Chess Championship 1958. I think it spilled over into 1959. So this is played in New York, USA, 1958. Okay, let's have a look. E4 from Fischer, and Rzewski plays C5. This is Sicilian defense. Let's connect to live book just in case and add a Koblents as well. I have the new Houdini actually. Let's use that one. Houdini 6 recently obtained. So we have knight f3, knight c6, d4. So Fischer goes for an open variation. g6. So it's accelerated fianchetto here. This is one of the main moves. Knight f6, e6, or g6 is the top three sort of main moves there. And often white plays c4 here because black hasn't yet committed white to defend that pawn. So white often is setting up the Monoxy bind. That seems to be in fact the most trendy move to get this Monoxy bind, whilst knight c3 hasn't been forced. But Fischer kind of bypasses that option here actually by playing the move bishop e3. This is the third most popular choice, bishop e3. And we have here knight f6 and now knight c3, bishop g7. So we're going into almost like a dragon, but black hasn't played d6 here. White actually doesn't want to castle queenside. I think this would actually favour black if white tried to castle kingside here. Well, it's simply not working in this position. I believe queen d2. Sorry, black castled here. Bishop b3 was played, which seems like a safety move. It's making that piece be protected. But if queen d2, I think knight g4 is strong. Basically, this is really annoying. I don't think there's actually time to play f3 either. Pardon me. I think black has some interesting choices actually here, including the weird looking queen b6. Yeah, I think if bishop b3 here, then knight takes e4 and it gets a bit messy actually. This is a bit of a messy position. Let's not go into that. So anyway, the bishop just retreated, and now d6 seems to be the most common move in this position, to play d6 now. Perhaps part of black's plan was to play perhaps for d5 in one go. Idealistically, this is an idealistic idea, maybe to get rid of this bishop first and then bang d5. So maybe that's the idealistic idea that could have been in mind. But this is actually a very unusual move, knight a5 in this position. This was the one played. So usually, you know, d6 and now f3. There's time for f3. And it's because it's very different now. Any queen b6, I think it's very different. Knight f5. That's good for white. So anyway, knight a5 was played, and in fact, there's essentially an interruption move played here. A kind of the preliminary tactic, I would say, is an interruption tactic, which in itself maybe sometimes is not terrible, but if an interruption creates a loose piece for even a moment, then it might be really a lethal thing to do, create an interruption. And white plays this interruption tactic, which is e5. Now I say it's an interruption because it's basically like a connection. You can imagine a connection between f8 and d8. And that connection is interrupted with knight e8. So the outcome here, we have potentially a loose queen. It's not actually technically protected by anything. The queen is protecting the knight, but all the other pieces are actually, well, apart from the rook, that is potentially an unprotected piece here. But how to actually exploit that is ingenious. So, and many people have referred to this as the Fischer Trap. The Fischer Trap. So, what can you see how to exploit d8? I've given quite a big clue actually. So, white play. What would be your thoughts here? What would you play with white? So, this is a kind of Fischer Trap. So, it's set off first by this kind of subtle interruption of the queen's protection on d8. So, white play here. Any ideas? It's actually forcing moves which are quite often bringing out issues, actually literally bringing issues. Almost as if forcing moves bring issues which you might realise into the foreground. These issues might be in the background, that there's a loose queen potentially on d8, but it's actually forcing moves which push a kind of issue right into the foreground. But what forcing moves in particular here? Now, someone's mentioned like bishop, sorry, someone's mentioned e6. Was there any other suggestions? Knight c6, not so much. We can just take there. No, not so much knight c6. Now e6, I think black actually seems to be able to play d takes here. Okay, well done if you get this, like 100 points. The amazing forcing move is actually bishop takes f7. So the bishop does damage as its last breath. It was about to be snapped up. Maybe black was going to play something else after. So before it's actually snapped off. Now, if the king went here, it doesn't matter actually. We still have the same tactic as in the game. So what is that tactic now after rook takes f7? White to play here. So now we've actually got something's been created in the position as well. Remember, these were both kind of, that was a kind of pinned pawn there, and now we've got another kind of pinned pawn as well in the position. Actually, there's a kind of wealth of tactical ideas going on here. We've got basically an interruption with an implication of a loose piece, forcing moves which bring to the foreground not only the loose piece but also a pin here. See, there's a pin now, a pinned pawn here actually. Bang! So in the foreground totally now is this pinned pawn and that queen which isn't protected by anything. And there's no escape for the queen. The queen's been checkmated. Really, black could have resigned here. But I think there was a certain amount of rivalry between the two. And actually, I don't know how many of you know this, they had actually a match between each other as well. I think maybe... sorry, rook takes f7 is a variation anyway. In the game, king takes was played. does this rule out that idea? It's played anyway, actually. 96 is played anyway. Because if king takes, I think black gets mated check. And the king's just not going to survive after f4. There's like e6 check coming. The king's not surviving there. A quick way to mate would be like this. Check. Check. And either queen h3 or queen g5 will do. So yeah, the king can't really take that. So black just gave up the queen, but yeah, he could really resign here. This could be like a really short game, but he played on. We have queen takes d8, but yeah, some people have kind of labelled this the Fischer Trap. Even it is like a major trap. So it would have been a very short US Championship game. Anyway, the game continued a bit. Knight c6, queen dropped back. Black took a centre pawn. So how good is Fischer's technique? He just exchanges off bishops. Queen e2 here, attacking the knight on c4. There's really not much to see because white is just absolutely winning, basically. Yeah, there's not really much to do here for black. It's surprising he plays on. He's just crumbling. Basically, this queen is a queen really sometimes. That's why I'm not going to really spend too much time on this. Rook takes c6 is interesting. Speeds up things for b7. Yeah, if it's still massively advantageous for white. So that little exchange sacrifice is cute, I guess, in its own right. It's pretty logical though. That's a very dangerous pawn. So the queen versus rook and knight, it's winning immediately after queen a8 anyway. Well, black resigned. Let's say he plays the check to sort of relieve the knight. This position, we've just got a winning outside pawn. It should be easy enough to convert that. So Rozewski threw in the towel. Okay, so it's interesting. Yeah, it's interesting that this trap sequence. Just it's interesting. Bishop b3. It's a very precise move. It's actually given us like one of the top engine choices. Just bishop b3 here. So black's idea is refuted. This yeah. Now on other choices, by the way, knight takes b3. That just loses material. We have material here. Just one on material. This knight's not going anywhere, so that was hopeless as well. And the other thing to cover, just for a moment maybe, is this. There would be g4, just trapping that knight there. So the interruption is fairly forced actually, and it's brutal. Yeah, this whole idea of bishop f7 and knight e6, it's quite amazing if you haven't seen it before. All right, let's go on to the next game I'd like to show you. Okay. Which is Botvinnik against Smyslov. Let's load that up. But yeah, forcing moves tend to bring issues into the foreground quite spectacularly sometimes. It's good to be able to identify the issues at some sort of high-level view as well, and then work out how you can get there. So here, Botvinnik against Smyslov. Let's take Smyslov's perspective. D4 knight f6. He played actually a king's engine. Tried to g3, bishop g7, bishop g2. So Botvinnik's trying to be his usual solid self with white. We have knight bd7 here, and now e5, e4, c6. And quite often the queen is coming out to b6 to put pressure on some dark squares from b6. And here we have that idea on hold for a moment because of the insertion of knight g4. So after bishop g5, now we have queen b6. So putting pressure on these dark squares. It seems pretty tactical, this idea. h3, and in fact black doesn't retreat knight, he plays e takes d4, knight a4, queen a6, and this, I believe this happened in a Kasparov game many years later, which Kasparov won with black. I think Kasparov's played this line. It's crazy, a bit crazy. Yeah, because it's a piece sack on g4. One pawn's been taken, but now b5. And you might think, well, hold on, isn't there an issue on this diagonal? White took on d4, takes, and now knight takes c6. So yeah, trying to exploit the fact that this is like potentially an embarrassing thing, isn't it? Well, actually, black just allowed this. Queen takes, he went straight into e5, bang, straight into this. After queen takes c4, bishop takes, knight takes e5. So black is the exchange down. Both sides have got 4 pieces each, but black is the exchange down. But how many pawns? It's like for one pawn here, one pawn. Engines think this is about equal, actually, this position. So, tricky position. Maybe the bishop could drop back, or queen takes d6. These are possible, but white played, Bobotsov played rook c1. We have now queen b4. a3, queen takes b2. Queen takes a4. In fact, it seems here that white might be technically better with bishop e4. It's hard to see maybe exactly white's plan here. It's difficult. Yeah, it's difficult. So anyway, queen takes a4, and now we do have bishop b7, and there is a theme here of trying to exacerbate an issue on light squares by getting rid of the opponent's light square defender. So this is a classic like recipe for disaster, of course, which has been seen in tons and tons of games. So here, is this going to be the prominent theme? But also, doesn't this tactically seem, isn't there an issue with bishop b7 in this position? It's a nice idea, but white is not obliged to take care. I know that would be nice light square weaknesses and threatening knight f3, but white's not obliged to take care. Actually, has there been a mistake? Have I got the wrong move score? Can you see a move for white in this position? White's play, and do you think white would be winning with this next move? Have I got a typo? White's play, what would you play with white? Any ideas? Okay, it's a simple theme underlying this game, very simple theme again, maybe a bit like the Fischer game. It's a simple theme. What are our recipes for disaster, and how do forcing moves bring those recipes for disaster right into the foreground? So the recipes for disaster, there is actually a loose piece on g5. There's weakened light squares. White did try and exploit basically this. Isn't this a problem? Now if the queen moves, surely then white just takes it and thanks very much, next game. But black played check, and you might think, well, hold on, you don't have to go into a double check here. You know, there's a double check. You don't have to go into that. In fact, there's king h1, right? And that still leaves this painful looking skewer. But black has an idea here. Black has a simple, amazing idea. Yeah, black's play here. I love the fact it's a simple theme fundamentally. When many a game has been won swapping off the defensive fianchettoed bishop, but the levels of spectacularness vary from game to game. But this is one of the more spectacular demonstrations here. Black to play. What would you play with black? Now, some of you are saying knight takes g5. Actually, this is check. White could actually play bishop takes b7 here. And say the queen moved here. White's actually just better, either with taking. White's just doing very well here after f4. White's doing very well. It would be the exchange up for a pawn. So that's not the idea, actually. That's not the idea. Knight takes g5. I can't believe it. None of you have seen this classic game. I don't believe this. There's been lots of suggestions here. I do not believe this. Knight d2, you say. Knight d2. Really? There's been a few of you voting knight d2 here. I'm stunned. I'm stunned. You guys have not seen this iconic game by Smyslov, played in the World Championship match of 1954. Every Russian schoolboy knows all the World Chess Championship games off by heart. Yeah, they're all. You know, when you go to the toilet, they should all be there on the wall. All the World Championship games off by heart. This is a World Championship game, one of the more stunning ones, just because it was played in 1954. How did you guys miss this one? On knight d2, bishop takes b7. Gives equality. Actually, I see why now you all say knight d2. Actually, you got a point. It gives equality after knight takes b1. This is assessed as equal. Actually, it's assessed as equal. Yeah. Example: knight c3, queen d7, d5. I could take this a bit further. It reckons, engines reckon this is about equal anyway. This position. No, that's not the idea. But it's a very good try. So I'll give you 50 points for that, actually. Now, some of you have said knight e1. In this case, bishop takes b7. Oh, the interruption is a very clever idea. Very clever interruption idea. Maybe because I mentioned it in the previous game. After queen takes b1, it doesn't actually give that much, though, in this particular position after bishop e4. White is actually better here. White's better here. Yeah, so it's an interesting idea. I'll give you 20 points for that, because I can see that there's some logic. You know, some of you are awake tonight. I don't know. Is it because of the later time that I've somehow hit a whole mass of people that are actually awake for this broadcast, giving me ideas, moves which are nearly quite good. But no, it's not the killer move though. You're missing the killer move. Sorry. So we have this position, yeah. where king h1 was played. It's very good ideas. So very good idea of an interruption, yes, and very good idea of winning the rook, yes. But these are not the moves. These are not the moves. Now I'm just going to do a sanity check why it would be difficult to see this move. I think someone might have mentioned it. No, a couple of you have mentioned it actually. Let me do a sanity check. Why would it be difficult to see this move? Okay, the move is simply to take on a8. So you get 3 units, all right, of material. Now you get another 3 units, that's 6, and it's check. And the point here is, if king g1, then, oh, I thought it was going to be, it's not checkmate. Knight, knight here is not checkmate, by the way, because of king h2. No. So, but black, in this position, just snaps off. Well, he plays another check to f3 actually. Then he snaps off on b2. And black I think you have to the thing is, it looks as though black isn't winning, maybe from a material point of view. If you count the queen as 10 and these guys as 3 each, then you might think, well, so what? You might think, so what? But I think you've got to add to that material the idea that the king is actually quite bad in this position, because this bishop is actually worth more relative to the king's safety. This bishop's kind of worth more. So in fact, because of that and the king's awkward position and the good piece coordination, black's actually a lot better here. Black's actually like winning this position. White tried queen takes a7. And this move, rook b1, is kind of ruled out with this centralizing move, bishop e4. It just cuts that rook. The rook is running out of useful squares. It's got d1, that's about it. So it can't use e1 because of the knight. So this is quite a massive centralization move. And in a way, this reminds me of Fischer's immortal game when he was like 16, you know, game of the century. When Fischer had a load of material for one of the Byrne brothers, he started massively centralizing all his minor bits. And here it's like the same procedure. You've got a load of bits for the queen, and there's like massive centralization in progress. a4. This next move betrays another idea, though. King g7, a very naughty idea is hinted by king g7. Can you see the naughty idea hinted by king g7? What's the naughty idea by hinted? Naughty move coming up here, hinted. Anyone? See, actually, when I said this is a nice centralizing move, yeah, and at an intuitive level, it's nice to centralize pieces. Actually, at a concrete level, it ticks the boxes because it provides resources sometimes, like bishop f5. So centralization isn't just a nice thing at a more abstract, waffly level. It's actually a great thing at a very practical level to start centralizing minor pieces. They give a lot more options for your pieces. But there's a very naughty suggestion of king g7 that either h5 or rook h8 is round the corner here, and that bishop f5, that centralized bishop, makes a lot more sense as well. So this is like round the corner now after king g7. The rook's able to use h8. The rook here uses its one square available. You can see that it's being cut on this first rank rather miserably, but it has got this one square available. Well, maybe this one as well, but it wants to use this one with rook d1. But we get another massive centralization move, which not only protects the pawn, but also, well, it could be useful for some attacking purposes later. But yeah, bishop e5. So you can see these pieces massively centralized, with h5 on the way. h5 or rook h8. This is the threat the two threats principally are Rook H8 and H5 here. This coordination of the minor pieces against the king means that the three minor pieces are actually outweighing this queen here, even though technically 3 plus 3 plus 3 9, if you say queen's 10, but it's the king safety factor with H5 here which is making the big difference, or Rook H8. So we have Queen E7 being played. Now I think this tries to dissuade, this tries to prepare against Rook H8. Rook H8 wasn't actually played in this position. If Rook H8 was played in this position, if we go with this H5 rather, if we go all the way, then G5, and it's still winning for black. No, it's still winning for black. No, he could have done this. I don't know. I don't know what is actually stopping black play Rook H8. Probably not much. But actually, maybe an even stronger move was played. Rook C8. And we have here A5. And the rook's actually going around this other way now. Yeah, it's going around this other way. So that's why Rook C8 has a lot going for it. Keeping open-minded. That's a great open-mindedness to use this. Almost like this opportunity was from a weakness of the last move. That was neglecting F2. And if the rook actually goes back to pay for its neglect, there's like Bishop D3 here anyway. And for example, this is going to be a massive coordination here against the king, threatening mate in 1 there. And if Queen E2, this is just winning. Yeah, that's just winning for black easily. So yeah, the rook's actually swung, keeping an open mind based on that kind of weakness of the last with that F2 liability. So anyway, King G2 was played here. And then we have Knight D4 check. King F1. And now Bishop F3. This is massive coordination here. And the rook's running out of squares again. The rook goes to B1. But now we just have to move Knight C6. And actually, Botvinnik resigns here. Let's see if the game continued. I think with Knight C6 it's vacated D4, so in some lines that's useful. On Queen B7 there's Bishop D4. It's just crashing down, to F2 next, and it's just pretty hopeless. For example, like this, and then the knight can come back for like Rook E2 check and nasties. It's hopeless. All the pieces are really coordinating really well. Just to show an example, let's say here. Give an example with yeah, it's like the check to follow. It's just all pretty nasty. Here, like threatening mate. It just gets extremely nasty extremely quickly. So yeah, there's huge coordination here. So Botvinnik actually, maybe a bit of a spoil sport actually. He resigned after Knight C6. He didn't, unlike the Fischer game I'm thinking of when he was 16, game of the century. He didn't want to play on to get mated after Bishop D4, unfortunately. The top choice seems to be Queen G5. Black can actually just take time to just take this pawn even. He doesn't have to go for any attack here. Because there's like Queen F4 maybe complicates things. You actually take this pawn first, and it's just at leisure. This position he can do. Black at leisure is going to be coming in with the knight. White can't really do anything. There's actually, if you look at Black's position as well, it's rock solid with these centralized pieces. If you think about like attacking that bishop, Knight B3 just in time, hitting the rook. So if Queen takes, there's Knight D2. If the rook moves somewhere, we end up again. It's just F2. There's a disaster on F2. or winning the queen like that. There's whole loads of there's lots of examples of piece coordination which all are going to be winning for black in this final position after knight c6. Okay, so that was a really neat idea, I thought, about how in when you're playing against the fianchetto variation, or a fianchetto in general, how sometimes it can be stunning tactically, the resources available after you take out that defensive bishop, because you've basically exacerbated weaknesses of the opponent's position. You've brought to the foreground, again, with tactical means in this game, the issues like the weak light squares, and there was also that loose bishop on g5. But to actually, after that, to centralise the pieces, and then the subtle threats, which are very difficult to parry, came in. But black was ingenious. He kept an open mind about the rook, not necessarily using the h-file. But even if he had used the h-file, it seems clear enough from the analysis here that actually he could have just. Both moves are given us super strong here. Either rook c8 to go to f2, or even rook h8. This is given us as winning as well. There's no real stopping. I think after h5, there's no real. H4 is apparently, this might even be more clear cut. In fact, with this position, where the king's stuck there with a pawn h4, this apparently is a forced checkmate. Even if we let the pawn run, there's rook c3. This is like forcing checkmate after rook c3. Let's have a quick look at this. There's an h3 check here. If takes knight g1, and it's going to be like rook h3. Yeah, there's other ways of forcing checkmate. Maybe he was a bit concerned about this pawn in the lines, but yeah, here it's just a forced checkmate after rook c3 is the quickest. And if here, say king f1, h2, you can see that pawn's like going to be potentially queening. If king here, check, and that's winning as well. So it turns out here, we didn't actually need this fancy rook maneuver. We could have done with rook h. There's other tactical ways of winning that after. Just for the record. Okay, just for the record. So the interesting thing for me, it's a classic theme of the fianchetto. You lose your fianchetto bishop, you might be in trouble. Or conversely, if you're the attacker, that's something to relish, those weaknesses. Okay, I hope you got something from these two games this week, and have a good week. Thanks very much. See you next week. Cheers then.